Good morning. Wednesday morning. I'm not at work. I'm actually quite groggy this morning, so I'm feeling a bit. I feel like a startled rabbit in a headlight at the moment. Um, I had a procedure yesterday. I had to go to St John of God Hospital here in Midland and have a planned procedure. It was to remove some abnormal growths. So they've been sent off, and they'll be analysed and go from there. So my throat is a tiny bit hoarse, which is why I've got plenty of water and God knows what today. Sadly, not gin, but so I am feeling a bit worse for wear. Having said that, I got to the hospital about 11:15 yesterday, and I eventually got seen about 3:30. That was a long wait. There was a lot of people in there, and it's quite funny. The anaesthetist, he came in and he had a chat to me. He was a South African guy, and he was lovely actually, and he was just chatting. I've had this procedure done before, and I told him it was in the UK, and we sort of had a laugh about the differences. And to be honest with you, there was a big difference between this procedure done here in Australia to the UK. And let's just say, here it's done a little bit more professional. So, I don't want to say any more really, because I love the NHS. Don't get me wrong, adore it, but you don't always do things right, believe me. Anyway, God, he could not find a vein at all, which was understandable because I was so dehydrated. I was fasting day before that, and I had no water, and I felt like crap, to be honest with you, and I still feel like crap now. But he eventually found a vein, and my last experience of having a cannula put in was very painful, but he was very gentle. He was smacking my hand a bit, but he was gentle. So if you're going to get a cannula put in, request an anaesthetist to do it, because they know what they're doing. They really do. And it didn't hurt at all. So I was very grateful for that. It got me thinking about what I want to talk about today, because I'm not at work. I'm sort of in recovery mode, and I thought I'd just do a quick chat. I look half asleep actually, but hey. And anyway, I wanted to have a chat about healthcare. I've lived under 3 different healthcare systems. I've lived in Spain, I've lived in the UK, and I now live in Australia. So I've got a little bit of knowledge about them. Now, we talk about Spain first, because I was there the shortest amount of time, just 2.5 years. I can't remember, but it was a relatively short period of time on the scale of things. And they do have a healthcare system. It's called SNS, Spanish National something system, I think. And I never really used it. I never had a need to. But the most important thing to be able to use that system is to have a contract at work. And I had a contract. I had contracts all the way along. Now, the final company I worked for gave me a contract, and it was a good job and good money for Spain. Still never needed the house service. But toward the end of my time with this organisation, I needed to see a doctor. So naturally, I went along, and they said, no, you can't. You're not on the system. So the contract I initially had been removed at some stage, and I was not informed or told. So it was done behind my back. So when I actually needed to see a doctor, I couldn't. Absolutely incensed. What that person did was illegal. I'm not going to mention names, because there's no point. It was many years ago. But I had to make alternative arrangements. Now, a lot of expats will have private healthcare. Now, I went to what was called the Southern Clinic in Gran Alicante, who were exceptional. Now, I paid, I think it was about €50 to see an English-speaking doctor. Now, if I'd gone to the usual state GP surgery, I would have still had to have paid for an interpreter, because it's not free in Spain like it would be here or the UK, and that would have cost me €50. So it's a no-brainer. Just stick to the private clinic, and I did, and they were good. They were amazing. They're the ones who put me on statins and blood pressure tablets and all the rest of it, and yeah, they were good. I can't fault them. I had an MOT and a clinic there, and I think it was about €150. They did everything, absolutely everything, and from X-rays to lung X-rays, everything in this clinic, and yeah, it was amazing. I had a private prescription, so I was given a private prescription, which was a little bit more expensive. It was cheaper actually, I think, to buy over the counter there than what it was to actually have a prescription, and so that was a bit of a weird one. The pravastatin that I was prescribed was, I think it was about €35. I think he said dollars then, €35 a time, whereas the blood pressure tablets that I could buy over the counter were about €2. It was a bit of a weird system. I mean, look, I don't have that much experience on it, but had I, still had that work contract, I would have been using it like any, other person. So it was okay. It was okay. It's near apparently it's near the top of the list on health services in the world. I can't see that myself, but who knows? I went to a hospital on occasion, only with a friend who had to go, and it was quite poorly maintained, shall we say, akin to the NHS in the UK. So let's talk about the NHS in the UK. I was born in the 70s. I grew up under the NHS. I remember I had an NHS dentist. Yes, back in the day, in the 1970s, you could get an NHS dentist. Amazing, truly amazing. He was an old naval dentist, and he didn't, look, even when he extracted teeth or did fillings, there were no injections or anything. It was just, it was what it was. You put up with it, put up with the pain. They taught me to brush my teeth. They didn't do it very well because my teeth are pretty bad, to be fair. The NHS looked after me, and I can see a doctor for free. Everything in the NHS was free. Even as a taxpayer, I got prescriptions for £10 per month, max, because I had like a prepayment certificate. Everything was free. Now, I'm not so sure that's a good thing. Initially, so when you go back to like the 1980s, etc., I could see a doctor whenever I wanted to. There was no issue with that. But as time went on, when I got back from Spain and I was living with my aunt in Portsmouth, there was a 2 to 3 week wait to see a doctor. Incredible, absolutely incredible. Now, the only thing I can say about that is it's as if, I mean, the population explosion in the UK has been rapid, to be fair, and the infrastructure or the building of new hospitals has not kept up pace. GPs are leaving the UK dramatically. I think more or less every GP I've seen here in Australia have either been from the UK, Spain, funnily enough, and South Africa. People are coming over here in their droves because they're paid good money over here. GPs, surgeons, nurses, they are paid very good money. They're paid a lot more than what they are in the UK for sure. But you do have to pay. Australia itself as a health system is, I suppose it's a cross between the NHS and the American system. So I pay for huge amounts of the service, but there are other aspects of it I don't pay for. So for example, the procedure I had yesterday, I don't pay for. I would have done if I'd had private health insurance, but yesterday I didn't. And there was wait. So there was quite a long wait for that. Otherwise, I could have seen a consultant within a week and a half. For me, it was about 3 months. Thankfully, my situation wasn't urgent. Had it been, it might have been a different story. Prescriptions are exceedingly expensive over here. As I said, in the UK, prepayment certificate, £10. Here, I'm paying for each individual prescription, full price, lots of money. And you can get generic brands, you can get the cheaper brands. The only good thing over here is you could go from chemist to chemist and one would be cheaper than the next. Whereas in the UK, you'd pay the same no matter what. So I could go in and say, I want this medication, but I want a cheaper brand or a generic brand, and I could get that. So instead of paying $20, $30, I would pay $6 or $7. It's up to me. That's my request. What other things do I pay for here? A GP. So if I want to see a GP, I have to pay for that. In the UK, it was free and I waited weeks. Here, I pay, what is it now? $80 to $100, $80 to $120 or $30 to see a GP, depending on how long you want to see your GP for. I could see one for up to half an hour if I want to, but I will pay for that. And I do get a Medicare rebate. So the system here is called Medicare. I think in the States, is it Medicaid? I don't know, but it's Medicare here. Now, I do get a rebate on that. So I will pay, on average, I pay $85 to see a GP, but I get half of that back through Medicare. So I literally, tap my card and I'm paying full price, and then half of it comes back the next day. A bit bizarre. Why don't you just pay half anyway? But hey, I like that. I like paying for a doctor. It limits me seeing a doctor, whereas in the UK, I wanted to see a doctor all the time. And my health anxiety, I suppose, the health anxiety I suffered with really was exacerbated by the system in the UK, where I could see a GP when I wanted to. Here it's very different. I go when I absolutely have to, absolutely necessary, and I pay for that privilege. But I can see them the next day. Actually, I can see them on the same day. If there's an appointment, I will see them, and I also have the same doctor, whereas you can't guarantee that in the UK. So I can see the same GP every now and again. The GP knows me. If I want to, I can pop it on for a chat, and he knows me. He knows my records. He knows everything about me. In fact, the GP here knows more about me than my one did in the UK. That's fine. I can't fault that. There are also minor procedures that I will have to pay for. So, for example, mole checks, stuff like that. I know my mother-in-law recently had to have a mole removed from her arm, and she paid, I think she paid $300 for that. She's a pensioner, just on a state pension. She still paid $300. She did get a rebate as such, but she still had to pay that money. And also in the UK, as a pensioner, you will not pay for prescriptions. Here you do. Mum-in-law also has cancer, which is thankfully being managed. She pays for her cancer medication. She wouldn't have to in the UK. there's a pattern here. The reason the health service in Britain is failing is because everything is free. Everything. Dentistry is another matter. Now, I saw a dentist in Spain. Now, Spain was actually the cheapest to see a dentist. I think back then I paid about €20 to see a dentist, which was in 2018. In the UK, I did manage to get an NHS dentist in the end. They are very few and far between. And this particular dentist opened up in Portsmouth and they advertised. And I was literally on that phone and got a place. So proud of myself. And I saw the dentist when I was supposed to and all the rest of it. And I was thrilled to actually get one. I hadn't had one in years, probably since I was a child. But obviously I left and came to Australia, so I had to give up. Do you know, I would have flown back to UK just to get that NHS dentist. And actually they were very good dentists as well. Can't complain. So I was just paying the bare minimum. Having said that, the dental charges here in Australia are not that much. So the last checkup I had and a clean and all the rest of it cost me, God, I think it was just under $30, which is about £15, I think. But I do have private healthcare for dentistry when they pay half. Even so, it was still cheap, very cheap. So dentistry is good here. I had to, they did say to me I had to have a crown put in it's about 1.5 years ago now. Thankfully I didn't because my tooth couldn't take it, but that would have cost me about $1,800 to $2,000. So there are things that are expensive, but general checkups, as long as you look after your teeth, absolutely fine, no problems at all. When I look at the three systems that I've lived under, I have very differing experiences. The UK one I have a fondness for. The NHS, I think all British people have a fondness for the NHS, no matter how bad it can be at times, because they do look after you from the moment you're born to the moment you die for free. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for it, but it was dire. It really was. Hospital wait times, awful. I shouted loud, so that I was one of the loudest vocal people you can imagine in order to get the treatment I wanted or needed. So during COVID, I still had procedures done. I still saw a GP. It's because I actually knew what to say, when to say it. Shout, scream. Most people don't. My father's a prime example. You know, he would be very, very quiet. You know, GP says, no, I can't see you. I can't. I just cannot. You have to go on a telephone waiting list for a telephone call, and then we will sort of triage you and then decide whether or not you can see a doctor. I tended to bypass that, and I said, no, it's not happening. I am seeing a doctor. And they did it. You know, it's because I could speak for myself, and that is important. I do the same here. The only place I couldn't do it was Spain, but I couldn't speak Spanish. So the different healthcare systems have been an experience. I do have a favourite, obviously, and it's Australia. I have to pay, yes, I do have to pay a lot of money. We get here what's called I've got to think of the word. We have an amount of money allocated each year. Excuse me. Now I think is it $2,500 or $3,000? I can't remember. Gosh, once you get over that amount, you don't pay so much, but otherwise you're paying for stuff. So when you get to the end of your allowance for the year, then they you don't pay the exorbitant charges. I've never got to the end of my allowance, funnily enough. Even though I might have anxiety or health anxiety, I still never got to the end of that allowance. I've had various procedures here. You know, I had procedures done in the UK. Got MRSA in the UK. Kind of didn't get it here. It's a difficult one. You know, the hospitals aren't particularly run down in Britain. Although Queen Alexandra Hospital was good. Here they don't have the same setup that you would get in the UK. So you don't have these wards of beds. They are literally individual beds in sort of alcoves. And so it's kind of like a room, really, even in the state sector. So, and the food is amazing here, by the way. The food is great. Whether you're a private patient or you're a national health patient here, the food is amazing. It's very, very different to Britain. So yes, my favourite is Australia, but I have that soft spot for the UK, always will do. You know, they helped me out through some awful experiences in my life, and yeah, I can't fault them, and I don't think many British people want to, you know, attack the NHS. You know, if anything, we attack governments for running down the NHS, and it's a similar circumstance here. Australia has shown me a new way of doing healthcare. It's something the UK needs to do, I think, in order to survive. You need to pay to see a GP. You have to. My auntie Helen actually is she works in the healthcare system on the Channel Islands, and she was telling me that you pay, I think it was £50 to see a doctor over there, and the healthcare, although it's a tiny island or series of islands, the healthcare system itself is, you know, works perfectly well, and the UK will need to follow suit at some point, I'm sure, really sure. Otherwise it will collapse. Quite simple. So anyway, enough of my ramblings today. I need to get something to eat because, as I said, I'm still groggy from yesterday. And as I said, my experience yesterday of the health service was wonderful. I had the same procedure done, funnily enough, in the UK, and it wasn't half as good as what it was here. And yeah, the South African consultant was talking to me. He said, "Yeah, I've got experience of both too, and yeah, you're in the right place." So that was a blessing for sure. Good to talk to you. I hope to be back on better form next week, and I will do a blog. Funnily enough, I don't have any more health anxieties at the moment. That's all over and done with at the moment, at least. So I'll probably be in a much better mood. So take care of yourselves and see you next week.